Spotify just bought The Ringer, Bill Simmons' podcast network. You remember Bill Simmons from ESPN got fired 6 years ago because I guess he was cranky. I don't know. And he said, well, screw you, ESPN. I'm going to start a podcast network and do sports quite successfully. 30 shows. They also do a movie you watch along with them. They do a couple of other culture shows. Just sold to Spotify. Can I tell you this was a knife in my heart? That just because they're basically the same size as we are. We have 25 shows or something. They have 30. They have 18 million in revenue. We have like 11. $141 million base. And if they perform and Bill doesn't quit in a huff, $194 million for a freaking podcast network.
Leo, I mean, you're underpaid, is what I'm hearing.
I am underpaid. What did I do wrong? I'm thrilled for Bill. I think it's great, and Ringer's great, and he's done a great job, and they're very good podcasts. They probably have a bigger audience than us because I think more people are into sport ball than technology. However, I'm impressed.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this because I just got access to the podcast that I'm on with TechCrunch's Spotify Analytics. And this was a revelation to me.
What do they know?
Well, what I was really fascinated to find out, it has the usual stuff like where you're being downloaded, where you're being streamed, that sort of thing, how many people stream your show, whatever. But the data point that it had that I really found fascinating was because they have the player built in, they can tell you how long people are listening to your show as a percentage.
And one thing advertisers always ask, and I bet they ask you, is did they hear our ad?
Yes.
And we don't know that. We only know if the show was downloaded. It's like asking a magazine, did they see our ad? I don't know. They got the magazine. I hope they read it. I don't know. You can't prove that.
But now I can say, yes, we put in a small teaser ad, say at the 18-minute mark, and we know that 74.5% of people were still listening at that point. And the cool thing for me, and this was a real like a weight off my shoulders, was that nearly everyone finishes the show. I was terrified we were going to get this data and find that everyone listened for 3 minutes and skip the whole, But that was it was a data point that I didn't know that I wanted to have. But once I had it, I could not.
I don't want to know
anymore.
that. Our shows. How long is your show?
Between 25 and 35
Who the hell couldn't finish that? Our shows go on and on and on and on and on.
Yes, not only does this validate the podcast market, it provides such a competitive advantage, for better or worse.
I have a theory. Go ahead, Dan. I'll tell you my theory.
No, your theory.
So I have a theory because there's no way if a company makes 18 revenue, not profit, they have 90 employees. We have 25. So I think their revenue is probably their profit's fairly low, lower than ours, I would guess. So there's no way they're worth 100 times profit. Alex, you cover business. What's the typical multiple that companies go for?
So you're talking about a price earnings ratio, right? And off of 18 million, let's say they made a profit of 2 million, that'd be a 100x multiple if they're worth about 200, including incentives.
100 seems high. It seems high.
So they're certainly not being valued on their profit.
Spotify's not saying, we'll make our money back in 100 years. No.
But what Spotify is saying is that you will not give up your Bill Simmons, apparently. And so you will stay on Spotify subscriber.
Yes.
Exactly. And we'll put these only on Spotify in time. All you Apple Music dorks don't get them now. So ha ha ha. And at $8, $10, $12 a month, you can make back your money relatively quickly. It's a cool gambit. And the subtext here, the background, is that Spotify's margins, their gross margins are quite low because they don't own the content they stream. So they're stuck about 25%, which doesn't leave a lot of money.
That's changing. And I think part of this is because they're worried, they have the Netflix problem, right? Netflix got pressured by the movie companies and they couldn't get the good movies, so they ended up making their own, and that worked well. So Spotify's looking at that saying, we live at the pleasure of these crap record companies. They could put us out of business anytime. We better have our own content.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing. They're making their own content. But I think their only way that, they paid $200 million for Gimlet. They paid almost $200 million for Ringer. The only way these companies are worth that kind of money is if Spotify can corner the podcast market.
They're treating it like it's zero sum.
They want to corner the market. And here's the methodology for doing that. And by the way, we will never – I believe in RSS. I want our shows to be everywhere, and I want you to be able to use any client you want. That is a problem because we won't have the information about you, but we know our audience doesn't want that. We won't have the information about you that Spotify has. If Spotify can go to advertisers and say, well, you shouldn't buy ads on Twit, they don't know anything about their audience. We know everything about your audience. We can even tell you how many people heard your ad, and we'll charge you based on that instead. Advertising will dry up for RSS. True podcasts will dry up, and it will only exist for Spotify. Companies that can tell you that kind of information. And the reason I have this conspiracy theory is that's what happened to the web.
With advertising.
It became apps.
Ad tech. Ad tech transformed the web into the junk pile it is today. And I fear that it's going to happen to podcasting. And I think the only reason Spotify can say, well, it's worth $500 million to buy all these podcasts because we'll corner the market. And, down the road, all the revenue will come to us.
I mean, maybe. I mean, Spotify's making a big bet. I mean, Apple's not going to take this laying down. They'll have a similar convenient product. Yeah, there's also Deezer out there. There's still a lot of players, so this isn't a foregone conclusion. But
most podcasters want to do what we're doing. I don't think Marco Arment, who makes Overcast, is going to move his podcast to Spotify. That wouldn't ever happen. And we're not. And so I have a feeling that what's going to happen is it's going to be a hard battle. But but the scary thing is they're going to put pressure on us because advertisers, which is our lifeblood, without advertising, we have no revenue. If advertisers buy this plan, your favorite podcast could go away.
I wouldn't worry about Twit, though, because the Twit audience, so far as I can tell, having been on the show for, off and on for a couple of years, is pretty dedicated. But I think this could really attack the middle class of podcasting, not the folks like you guys.
Yeah, I'm not worried about for myself, but you're exactly right. I worry very much for the vibrant, exciting podcasting. Is kind of like the web used to be with blogs and anybody wanted to write about stuff, and often they could get ads. Google and Facebook concentrated it all and ended up kind of squeezing all those middle tier and low tier stuff. You can either do it as a hobby, or you have to join somebody big because there's nowhere in the middle to live. And I think that's what's going to happen I worry that's what's going to happen to podcasting.
It's going to be too bad. A lot of really fun independent creators will lose their revenue streams, and then the work will become a little bit too much. I mean, podcasting, people don't realize, is tons of work. Editing, guests, distribution, analytics, sales. I mean, it's not a simple process. And if the revenue goes down, that might just not be worth it for this kind of, middle 80% of the podcast market, which is a huge chunk of the shows people enjoy and love, but aren't big enough to probably get past this lack of data. But Spotify, the data they give you isn't always good or welcome, because I was told the artists that Equity listeners, my podcast, what they listen to, and it was disappointing. So but
advertisers don't care if you're disappointed. Advertisers want to know that, and they're going to say to you, we're not going to pay what you're asking because I'm looking at, what I'm saying is that this is all about empowering advertisers and disempowering content creators.
Okay, but one last point on that. Because we have the information from Spotify, we can kind of presume that works across other platforms, right? So because we know Spotify says on Spotify you have an 80% listener rated at 30 minutes or whatever it is, right? Then I can kind of say, well, probably the same thing on Apple Podcasts and so forth. So I can actually use the Spotify data, if I'm smart, to talk about my other platforms and then maybe give myself more firepower. A temporary Band-Aid, to your broader point, but I'm hoping that there's some wiggle room there for folks like my show, which isn't huge but also isn't small.
Right. It's an I don't know. This is kind of inside baseball. I'm sorry I brought it up. I'm just jealous.
I mean, I want $200 million as well. So I tell you what, Spotify, if you want to buy equity,
we all got a number.
Do it for $20 million. That's a discount.